Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are across the globe. Welcome to the 72nd SADS Facebook Live or SADS Live program of the Sudden Arrhythmic Death Syndrome Foundation, the SADS Foundation. I'm Mike Ackerman, genetic cardiologist at the Mayo Clinic, and have the privilege of serving as Mayo Clinic's director of its Windland-Smith-Rice Genetic Heart Rhythm Clinic and our complementary Windland-Smith-Rice Sudden Death Genomics Laboratory. Today, as in almost every Friday, I'm here on behalf of Alice Laura, our CEO of the SADS Foundation, where we've been with you almost every Friday since March 2020. As you know, we've recently shifted to every other Friday or thereabouts. It's great to be with you, and I'm looking forward to see who's joining us live. And if you're watching this taped subsequently, I think you're going to enjoy this. We're going to spend some time with a wonderful family and a wonderful mom, Meredith Loveless, and learn her family story and what she did and what she's doing to increase awareness about genetic heart conditions and what you can do to become part of that army of volunteerism to help us increase the awareness everywhere regarding your family's condition. Before we do, as I've always started, a sobering reminder of where things are in this COVID-19 pandemic of ours globally, where there's been over 223 million cases worldwide, 4.6 million deaths in part due to COVID-19. In the United States, we have about 1/6 of those cases worldwide, 40.6 million cases. We'll be crossing 41 million by the time we're together next time. 655,000 deaths, just 35,000 deaths in the last month. So 1,000 deaths a day or more in the United States. It's really incredible when we think of it. Vaccine program, get vaccinated. About 180 million Americans are fully vaccinated with the double doses of Pfizer or Moderna, or the single dose of the Johnson & Johnson. So as I've said, ever since the vaccine came out, and I'll continue to say, there's no doubt about it, the therapeutic efficacy of COVID-19 vaccination is there. Is it a cure? No, of course not. But the vaccination is incredibly helpful. Get it. I got mine, and I'm waiting to hear if I should get a booster. That's another conversation. We haven't announced that, our leadership at Mayo Clinic, as to when we are to get our booster. If we had the Pfizer or Moderna, we're waiting for that. But I got mine. My family has gotten theirs, almost all. Yes, as you know, one of my 4 children, he has not yet gotten the vaccine, and I try as I do with all of you. If you have not gotten the vaccine, go get it. Go get it this weekend. The vast majority, 10 to 1 or more of the Delta breakthrough infections that are resulting in hospitalizations and or deaths, you can bet 10 to 1 that they are not vaccinated. The vaccines save lives. Get the vaccine. I think I've said that. I think I've been pretty consistent with that. So go do that. If you've done it already, tell a friend. I'll be talking to my son again and encouraging him to take the step. And I see some joining us. So Sue, great to have you with us. But now our program of the day, as we are wrapping up SADS Safe School Month, the month of September, as our kids are heading back to school. My youngest, my daughter, first year as a freshman at Minnesota State University. Go Mavericks. Just won her first tennis match as a college tennis player last weekend. Yay. So she's back to school. She's vaccinated. I'm not sure what the mask policy is on that campus, but we're all heading back to school. We're trying to figure out this back to school thing. And so pre-COVID, we've been busy about how to make your school SADS safe. How do we increase the awareness that's necessary among the appropriate people within the school so that it is safe for your child, or safe for somebody who has an unknown condition? Because after all, my patients who are well diagnosed, well treated, they're not even going to need safety because they're already safe. But how do we make our schools safe? And to do that, we'll be chatting with a wonderful mom who I recently came to get to know and to meet, Meredith Loveless. But before we do that, let's take a look at her daughter, Alexis, 14 years old. She is a beautiful young woman. Let's take a look at Alexis's story. So Aaron, do your magic, and I'll be back with you in just a couple minutes.
Dance isn't just something Alexis Loveless does. It's what she lives for.
Just where I always want to be. I wouldn't choose anything over it.
But now she has to carry in her dance bag more
Got the defibrillator
than just point shoes.
She was diagnosed with a condition called long QT syndrome, which is a cardiac channelopathy, and that condition puts her at risk for sudden cardiac death.
I could still go into cardiac arrest at any given moment.
It's just one of several conditions that falls under SADS, sudden arrhythmic death syndrome. Meredith Loveless and her daughter discovered she had it after she fainted in February, which is a sign.
So it leaves you feeling like, how am I going to protect my kid?
The Lovelaces are not alone. Dr. Michael Ackerman, the SADS Foundation president, said it kills around 5,000 young people every year. But with the right screening questions, around 50% of cases are preventable.
It's long overdue. It will do a great job once implemented to catch that half that give warning signs before their tragedy.
That's why the American Academy of Pediatrics released these new guidelines with just 4 questions for pediatricians to ask. Questions like, have you ever fainted or passed out without warning, like in Alexis's case?
We've been advocating this for 20 years. The SADS Foundation as an organization have put out these warning signs as about 15 years ago.
But for guidelines to actually be implemented is a whole other process.
So ideally, it would just go into effect with a click of the button and everybody would see it pop up in their electronic medical record they use as, these are questions we should ask this patient of this age. In practice, it's a lot more difficult for things to filter down.
Dr. Bishop says it could take months to become common practice. And Meredith hopes the changes trickle down fast to save lives.
I feel so grateful that we were able to find out what we were up against and be able to get the right treatments and know that she has a normal future.
Alexis now lives with a pacemaker and implantable cardiac defibrillator,
send a shock through my heart.
as well as a lot of gratitude.
Dance, I kind of took it for granted. It was just what I did. It was happy. And being told that I could almost be taken away from it, that was just hard.
So while her dance bag may be a bit lighter now, Alexis will carry this lesson with her every time she takes the stage. ANNABEL Thorpe, WLKY News.
Well, thanks, Aaron, for bringing that up. And that's just a beautiful story, a recent one from a wonderful young woman, Alexis, and her mother, Meredith. And with that, here comes Meredith.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me on today.
Well, thanks so much, Meredith, for joining us here at SADS Live. It's great to have you. And as you watch that new, kind of what went through your mind just now as you were recapping what you and Alexis did with that, really wonderful reporter?
Well, I was just grateful. I'm really happy that we had the opportunity to share her story, and that I hope that it touches people and that it helps to raise awareness. And I actually know it has, because I've had several people that saw the story that reached out, and some were long QT families that were like, we're in your area, and others were asking about how to, when should we get our kids screened? What kind of things. So it actually has already started conversations, and I hope that that's, way beyond what I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure it has. And I'm curious, Meredith, as I've learned and gotten to know a lot of families over the last many years now, some, they've been dealing with their SADS Foundation, their genetic heart disease story for years and years and years, and may or may not have gotten involved in sort of an intentional awareness effort. This is a pretty new story for your family's life. It's barely 6 months old. And I'm curious as to what became your why, as to why did you jump all in so quickly, which is wonderful, to become part of this awareness effort?
Well, I think that anyone who's been through a long QT diagnosis understands the shock, that you go through when you find this out, and that I think once we got through that shock and I started to learn more about the condition and read stories on the Facebook group of people who lost their loved ones to something that's preventable and something that's treatable, I just felt like when Alexis, in her story, she fainted at a pep rally, and it wasn't handled the way that a situation like that should have been handled. There was an AED in the gym, but nobody called for the AED. Nobody called 911. There was no emergency protocol initiated. And I believe it was the grace of God that he reset her little heart and gave her that second chance. So I felt like, we have this second chance and we're not going to waste it, that we're going to do what we can to raise awareness and try to help other families not experience a tragedy that could have been prevented. And so that's really the why both Alexis and I were motivated to share her story and try to make a difference.
Well, I'm so glad you and Alexis chose to do that. And many other of our SADS families have done that. And I think for those of you out there who didn't see it, there's a great webinar yesterday from the SADS Foundation by two moms, Rachel Flores and Jen White. They did a SADS webinar to sort of say, what do you need to do step by step for your school to make sure your school is SADS safe? And you saw, and it was just interesting to hear, Meredith, what you just said, that there were some tools there. The AED was there, but there was no strategy, no plan. And it doesn't matter if the tool is sitting there in the toolbox if nobody knows to run there and grab it and use it. So I bet you that was a bit eye-opening and disappointing for you to see that, the safety device was right there, but nobody had the reflex in motion to act on it.
Yeah, it definitely, I think that everyone with long QT syndrome, they have a story. They have something to share. And, for instance, if somebody was saved by bystander CPR, I mean, what better story to advocate for CPR training in the high school classrooms? And if somebody was saved by an AED, what better story for AED access? Or, in Alexis's case, where screening questions could have been part of picking her up, then her story is very real. And I think it allows people to really say, hey, that could have been my kid. And so I think that at each person with long QT, if their story can have an impact.
Absolutely. And I think of, like you said, with the CPR, and many of us have envisioned the day when CPR or chest compression only CPR becomes a high school graduation requirement. Having just an army of first responders would be incredible to see happen. And has that happened in your school yet, or are there steps in that direction?
Our schools, my daughter was 8th grade when all this started. And so our 8th grade school, they already had AEDs in the school, but they ended up training some additional faculty for using AEDs. And I think it really raised the awareness. And I actually just found out that they have somebody coming in to do not CPR certification, but CPR introduction for the 8th grade class this year.
Oh, that's great.
And then her current high school, our nurse is actually signed up for the SADS Safe School training.
Wow.
And she's taking measures to create a SADS Safe School, and we're working on some school-wide screening questions and stuff. So I think that, I think it is trickling into a bigger action within our local community.
Well, that's great to see that make your community safer. And it's one community at a time. It's one school at a time. I had an incredible story about a week ago, Meredith, where I told my families, all of my families, I advise for the children 18 and under that we equip those families with an automatic external defibrillator, an AED, as part of family safety gear, There's wonderful organizations like LifeSure that have helped our families secure their AED as the safety gear. But I tell them that you will almost never, ever need it. That if we do it right, you won't need this AED. And in my whole 20 plus year career, we've only had 4 AED rescue shocks of over 600 treated children. Well, last week it happened. And what happened was not one of my patients, but the family said, we used our AED last week, but not on our daughter. It was on the soccer referee. And they got the AED. The soccer umpire referee collapsed, saved the gentleman's life.
Wow.
And so I've told them, you're far more likely to need to use this AED on somebody else, not the person who we know has long QT syndrome or know has CPVT. But I didn't have the fulfillment of that prediction until last week.
And one of the things I want to share is the process that we went through in getting this news story out there, because I think that it can be intimidating to approach a news station. And I just want to say that it wasn't as hard and intimidating as it seems.
Yeah, how did you do that? How did that happen?
Well, I got the SADS advocacy email from SADS, and this was right around the time she was actually up at Mayo with you and your team, Dr. Ackerman, having her surgery. And I wrote a letter to the news. I just went on Google and I looked up our local news stations and got an email address right off their websites. And I wrote them a letter, and I included the letter that was included in the advocacy packet, but I personalized it and I shared components of ALEXIS's story, because I think that, the news piece is the important part, right? That's what we want, the meat of the story, but having the face with the story is what makes people watch the story, what makes it news. And so I told them about her having the surgery on her heart, and that she, almost had to give up dance, and I sent it out to the newspapers and several of the local news stations, and I heard nothing.
Oh.
So 2 weeks later, I did it again. And this time I tried different email addresses from the website, and it happened to hit somebody who saw the story. I think it was, just happened to hit the right person at the right time. And I got a phone call and they said, let's do a story. And the other thing I think is important to know is that, in that story, you were part of the story, and other doctors, and the SADS Foundation made all that happen. I wasn't having the one behind having to make all those moving parts fit together. So what our role was just sharing our story. And so I think that's something that, even though it's intimidating to be in front of the camera, I think that that the SADS Foundation really made it a whole lot easier to get all of those components together to make it a story that could have an impact.
That's great. Well, it didn't look like it was very intimidating for either you or Alexis. The two of you did a great job. I mean, I just love seeing that again a few minutes ago. You didn't have to practice, though. It seemed like it was all natural, and isn't that the point, that telling your own story is pretty natural?
Yes, I think that's, and we didn't know what they were going to ask us or exactly what we were going to be doing going into it. And Alexis and I talked about it. I was like, don't worry about, if you don't say something exactly right, or, it needs to just be your story from your heart. And that's what's going to have a much bigger impact than anything that's rehearsed or planned, because your story is an important story that can raise awareness.
So I think the encouragement for all people, whether their journey is a brand new one or relatively recent like yours and Alexis, or it's been a long 2-decade plus one, is to get involved and spread the word and do your part. I'm going to share with you a question from Christine and see how this resonates with you. So Christine, thanks for the question. Her daughter had passed out in a gym class doing jumping jacks. So she heard about Alexis's pep rally faint when she was doing jumping jacks when she was 11. Thankfully, she didn't have full cardiac arrest, just the faint. The school nurse called me after the event and did not seem concerned since she was fine. I picked her up from school and took her to pediatrician, and then was diagnosed 5 days later with CPVT. I'll pause there and say, Christine, whoever your pediatrician was and is, and whoever the subsequent cardiologist was and is, strong work. There's a tremendous delay in the diagnosis of CPVT out there, profound delay. 5 days is warp speed fast. Beautiful job on that pediatrician. But here's the question: what advice would you give a gym teacher or a school nurse for a student who passed out but seems okay afterwards? And I know what the answer is to that question, but Meredith, as you heard that, what things would you have liked to have happened or been told about your daughter's pep rally faint that might have attached more urgency to it than what was attached? Or maybe they did all the right things. What exactly happened after her faint?
They actually called me, and I was on my way to pick her up, and they said, does she have any, she was visiting the school. This was a school she was visiting to as a potential student for high school. And they're like, she's fainted. Does she have any medical problems? And I was like, what do you mean she's fainted? And they're like, she fainted, and I said, did you call 911? And they're like, no. I said, if she is unconscious, call 911. And so I think that, part of that education is educating the school and how to handle an emergency. And actually having a child with long QT syndrome in the school helps to do that, because, we have that emergency action plan. And now that all of her teachers know what to do if somebody faints. But for the 50% of kids that are going to do this with no warning, like what she did at that pep rally, which was her first and only event, then teachers need to have some education on what to do for an emergency. So I think that part of that SADS Safe School is preparing teachers for call 911, get your AED, get help, and ideally the teachers would all be CPR, but students can also be trained. I mean, they're hugely valuable resources, and they're all over the place. They're at the sporting events, they're at the malls, they're at the grocery stores. So I really feel like students are very capable of being first responders in a sense, and that they are a great source to educate.
Right. And I think for you, Christine, I think thanks for the question. And one of the things that we're trying to do at SADS Foundation, and maybe we have to figure out why aren't we doing it better or well enough, because I hear this story that you just gave all the time, where your daughter gave all the features of what we've called the danger faint. And yet it was disregarded, blown off as if, oh, just another teenager did another faint, because teenagers faint a lot. True statement. Teenagers do faint a lot. Mm-hmm. And we called it the vanilla faint. And in fact, the SADS program has some lecture, one that I gave on the vanilla faint, the normal faint that 25% of the planet will do. But until we're blue in the face, we've been telling teachers and school nurses and gym instructors that if a faint ever happens suddenly, without warning, during exercise, like jumping jacks, that is not a vanilla faint. That is what we call a penalty box faint. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go straight to a doctor, because that is a danger faint until proven otherwise. Now, is every faint during exercise, long QT, CPVT, a bad genetic heart condition? No. But I'm the one who determines that, not a school nurse, not a gym teacher. So all of you out there, you can be part of that message, that a faint that occurs suddenly during exercise without warning is the penalty box faint. That has to be viewed as if not an emergency, an urgency. That has to be viewed like concussion protocol, that you don't just reinstate the person who just got the head bonk in the game until they get concussion cleared. You do not clear a sudden exercise fainter until they've been cleared. And in this case, for Christine, your daughter, you saw a great pediatrician. I'd love to meet him or her. And then the cardiologist who made the correct diagnosis within a week of the faint. Strong, strong work. But Meredith, and hear me say that, what do we need to do to get that awareness message that seems so easy and obvious when I say it just now, to actually be there and sort of top of mind to the school nurses and the gym teachers and so forth?
I think that's where the stories are so important, because we can send a letter that says, oh, it's really important that you do, here's your emergency protocol for screening. But having a story with a student, with a person in the community, with a face, I think that has so much more memory, that has more impact. So advocacy doesn't, if you're not in an area where you can connect with your local news, you can make a video that can be circulated and shared through the schools. Kids can make a video that might actually resonate better with teenagers than something that adults would. Interviewing people even virtually and having them share their stories and then creating a message through that. I just think those would be effective ways. And if they could distribute that, it would only take a few minutes. If all the teachers had to watch a 5-minute educational program on what to do when somebody faints or how to handle these type of emergencies, that would have a lot more impact, I think, than trying to have them read through instructions.
Yeah. Yeah, and heck, with the talent from your daughter Alexis as a dancer, isn't there something called TikTok that we could do a TikTok awareness on the danger faint? I mean, maybe that's a new idea for Alexis. If it goes viral, make sure she remembers who suggested it.
I'll tell her. I think the dance team would have fun with that.
Yeah. I kind of like the ideas of where this could head. I'm not sure if I watched TikTok, but I know how to say it. So maybe there's an avenue there.
And I'm sure the membership here probably has a lot of other ideas that could be useful. But I think it's about just taking that step to say, we're going to do something.
Yeah.
And finding the something that resonates with you and that you feel can make an impact. And all of those little pieces coming together, I hope would lead to more diagnoses and more treatments and more solutions.
Yeah. Well, Victoria loves our TikTok awareness idea. So thanks, Victoria. So there's one vote for it. And Victoria, I saw what you just said about the awareness would be great, but then I just scrolled back up and I see what brings you to us today. And I'm so sorry, Victoria, about your son. 25 years old, your only child who died. And I just can't, that's just a wow. It's a heavy heart immediately for me to just read this on the sidebar. And it looks like you're still searching for the why, as to why did it happen and whether it was some issues with medications. And you've probably encountered what you never thought you would, is meeting a coroner and learning about toxicology and whether that did or did not affect things. So I'm so sorry, Victoria. I don't know when this may have occurred for your son and whether there's still any opportunity to do. We invented something some 20 years ago called the molecular autopsy, which is to do postmortem genetic testing if there's any tissue that has been archived that would lend itself to DNA analysis, genetic analysis. And just like we've been busy at SADS to do awareness for the living, we've also had a campaign to increase awareness among medical examiners, forensic pathologists, coroners, so that they can be thinking about the possibility of genetic heart conditions like long QT syndrome as the killer when their standard autopsy isn't revealing the why did it happen. And so, Victoria, I just thoughts with you, prayers with you, and I'm glad you like the TikTok, and it is very recent. I see just on May 23rd. So if there's any way that SADS we can be of help to solve your son's death or my program, please reach out to us. It'd be an honor to try to help. I see here that the action plan itself that you worked on developing. Let's talk a little about the components of the action plan. Did you develop that on your own, Meredith, with Alexis? Did you and the school nurse do that? Did you grab the action plan off of the SADS Foundation and then tailor it? How exactly did you do your action plan?
So we've had 2 action plans now. The first one you did for us. And when we first saw our letter and you gave us a little emergency letter that we shared with the school. The second one we did through the SADS Foundation. We got the back to school packet and filled out the emergency form. And because our nurse reached out to the SADS Foundation as well, she now has emergency plans. And so I did sit down and meet with the nurse right at the beginning of school, and they made all of her teachers aware and all of the administrators, so that everyone knows and can be making sure to keep, prepared to take action if they ever needed to. And so that was a great tool, and it was really clear what to do in an emergency.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too, don't you think, is to make it simple?
Yes.
Which it is simple, and I think sometimes we overcomplicate it. And as you know, for Alexis and for all of our patients, I keep the action plan really simple. If one of ours, has fainted and not woken up within 10 seconds, you assume it's sudden death. You activate 911, you start chest compressions, you get the AED, you put it on, and you hit the shock button if it tells you to do so. And it doesn't have to be made any more complicated than that. It's sort of an immediate 1, 2, 3, 4. And we need to make it as obvious as, okay, if your school is comfortable with the peanut allergy drill, they need to be comfortable with this drill, and create that as an expectation. Here's an expectation that's new to me. I didn't know of this one. Christine sharing with us, Meredith, that their children's school just decided to train all of the bus drivers and more staff members in CPR and AED after they were told about Christine's children's conditions. The buses are equipped with a portable AED as well, coming from the state of Illinois. And Christine, yay.
Yeah, what an amazing district.
Yeah, bravo bus drivers. And that is fantastic. I love that, because one of the areas that I've always been bothered by with the AED idea is how sometimes the schools, unintentionally, but it happens, have our children get stigmatized by, they're going on a field trip and they make them walk with the AED right by them, or they won't let them go on it, or they need to have mommy and daddy with them. And that might be fine when you're in 2nd grade, not so fine when you're an 8th grader like Alexis. And so I love that this school has taken this on to say, no, a known patient's going to be safe, and the unknown student is going to be safe on this bus. Bravo, your school district. So I'd be curious to learn how they made that happen. And so Christine, maybe you can reach out to us at the SADS, share what worked to make that move happen. That is a strong, beautiful move. What do you think of that one, Meredith?
I think that's amazing. I think that story is another good story. I mean, if you reached out to your local newspaper and you told them what a great job the school did, they might pick that up, because, it's nice to get some happy news. We've got so much negative news going around, that those happy stories, like a school responding and doing something, but then at the same time, it's also raising awareness, because people become more aware that these conditions are out there, and that could be shared with other schools. Like, look what this school did. And so all of those things can trickle down.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's one, and I think I know what a 504 is, but Leah is mentioning about having a 504 in place as well. For those who might be listening, do you know what that is? Is that a specific type of an EAP, emergency action plan?
I know it's for whenever kids have certain medical conditions or a variety of different conditions fall under it, then it puts into place the expectations for their care. So for instance, if they're going to miss school because they have to go to doctor's appointments, or they need to have a water bottle to make sure they stay hydrated, and the school has rules about carrying water bottles, then it allows all of those accommodations, and it is a legal document that protects those things.
Yeah. I'm going to shift gears for our last 5 minutes, Meredith, if I can, because you represent a subgroup of our families where it's not an easy time to be diagnosed with anything, let alone a sudden cardiac arrest type of condition like long QT syndrome. I'm speaking specifically about teenagers and adolescents. And what would you say or encourage our families out there who thought it was hard enough raising their adolescent child before a diagnosis like this? How is ALEXIS transitioning, coping? I guess it's different for every child. And when I met your daughter, she was beyond mature for her age. So maybe it's been I'm assuming maybe it hasn't been that big of a deal, but I call them the terrific teens, but some people call them the terrible teens. I refuse to accept that. Mine have been terrific teens with all of mine. But what's that been like?
Well,
seeing your daughter go through this?
This was her second genetic diagnosis. She has celiac disease as well. This one was certainly harder, but I think that kind of buffered the blow a little bit. I think that each kid is different, so I think you've got to be listening to them. Not every kid is going to be willing to get up on the news and share their story. I know some kids would not really want to be sharing. That doesn't mean they can't share in other ways, like through their art or through their music or other avenues, but I wouldn't pressure them. I did get her in with a counselor right away when she got diagnosed, just so she had somebody on the outside that she could talk to, and if there was things she just didn't want to talk to with us, that she had that resource. And we really tried to stay positive, to say, you know, we found this and now we're doing the steps that we need to do to keep you safe. And I was terrified and scared, and that anxiety was really real. I tried to not share that as much. I didn't want her to get anxious because I was. And so I tried to focus on the positives, and that really what led her being interested in being an advocate, because I think she was then able to see, wait, I'm actually in the big picture. I'm lucky because I'm going to be okay. I'm getting my treatment now. I've got my backup plan, and in her case, she still gets to continue to dance, which is her love. So she's okay.
That's great. And yeah, your daughter is more than okay. She's a really special young person. It's obvious the why there. I mean, she has beautiful parents, and you are wonderful. Thank you for what you chose to do so early in your journey to increase awareness. Thank you for making it kind of obvious that telling your story is all that you really have to do, and that SADS can help you do the rest. So all of you out there, join Meredith, become part of our volunteer army. We'd love to create a volunteer army for an increased media presence, whether that media presence is the TV station in Louisville, whether it's TikTok, whatever footprint we could have to increase awareness about these conditions, early detection for these conditions. When we know that one of these conditions is there, and we make the diagnosis and we install a treatment program, tragedy almost never happens. That's the great news. We're really good at treating these conditions when we know that they're there. So join Meredith and join the SADS Foundation, and share this SADS Facebook specifically with those around you who they might choose to join the volunteer army. That's my last word. Meredith, I'm going to give you the last word for this day, and then I'll say one more thing about kind of a very important day in the history of the United States and the world.
I just want to say that every one of your stories is important, and wherever that story is coming from, I think if you share it from your heart, you can make a difference. So I hope you get involved.
Thanks, Meredith. And those of you out there, thank you for joining us, whether you watched us live or you're going to see this later. Speaking of later, we'll be back together in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, it'll just be you and me and all of your questions. And I'll do my very best to answer each and every one of them. I love our question and answer session, and it would be a gross mistake for me not to mention the weekend upon us and what we'll be remembering tomorrow on the 20th anniversary of 9/11/2001. I'll never forget. I know you'll never forget, and I hope we all take time to reflect, to think about what it was like then, where we've come now, and to make sure we do everything we can that an inexplicable tragedy, an unacceptable occurrence never ever happens again. I'll be thinking of those families where tomorrow will be a vivid reminder of a profound loss that happened 20 years ago in this beautiful, wonderful country of ours, where I'm at right now, the United States of America. So blessings to all of you. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone.